Welcome, everyone. My name is D. Ross, and I proudly serve as the Tenant Leader Fellow with the National Low Income Housing Coalition. I'm so excited to be your host for today's Communications and Branding 101 webinar, the last bit of our first round series. So before we get started, here's a quick look at today's agenda. Um, so the welcome introduction will be done by me, of course, yours truly. And then Communications and Branding 101 will be featuring Lisa Marlow, Director of Communications for National Low Income Housing Coalition, and Carlton Taylor, Senior Graphics Communications Coordinator. There will be sharing valuable strategies to help you shape your message, build your presence, and communicate with purpose. And then later on in the agenda, I'll be sharing next steps. I'll return at the end to highlight how you can stay involved and keep building momentum through the Training Institute. A little bit about the Training Institute for some that may not know or may need a reminder is the Training Institute for Tenants and Residents is a national initiative rooted in education, empowerment, and organizing. Our mission is to build the leadership and capacity of renters and tenant leaders across the country, especially those most directly impacted by housing injustice. Through our workshops and resources and community building efforts, we are creating a powerful network of informed advocates ready to fight for housing justice and long term change. From tenant organizing to legal rights to strategic communications and branding, like today's topic, our goal is to equip you all with the tools to raise your voice and uplift your community. And with that being said, thank you for being with us today. Let's get started, and I'll pass it over to Lisa and Carlton.
Hi, Dee. Thank you so much for allowing us to join this call, for inviting us to this webinar. I know that I'm truly honored to help close out this series on this topic of communications and branding. So, again, as Dee mentioned, my name is Lisa Marlow. I'm the Director of Communications at the National Low Income Housing Coalition, or NLIHC. I've been in the communications field for more than 15 years. For the majority of my professional career, I've worked with nonprofit organizations. I've worked on communications for medical and blood bank trade organizations, grassroots faith-based organizations, small business member organizations, and I've even worked at a PR agency and built communication plans for multi-million dollar clients and for-profit organizations. But working on communication uh, opportunities for NLIC has far been my favorite. That's one of the reasons why I recently returned to uh, the National Low Income Housing Coalition as a staff person after originally leaving in 2020. Communications in housing nonprofits allows everybody to reach an array of people through messaging and with very nuanced research. The issue of housing is nonpartisan and affects everyone. Even if you are a millionaire, you know that real estate is a key part of building wealth. But organizations like NLIC, Invisible People, Community Empowerment Fund, for example, hold a special place in the world of housing because our messaging isn't just about how to acquire more land. It's often about how can people get access to safe, decent, affordable homes, homes that they can be kicked out of in the following month just because they were already struggling to make ends meet. So that's where communications come into play. With a communications plan, any organization can be successful at amplifying their message. But a communications plan does require that you set realistic goals and target audiences. So, the slide that's on the screen now includes a quote about communications from author and former presidential speechwriter James C. Humes. The art of communication is the language of leadership. Next slide, please. So here's another quote from journalist and author Cindy Harris. The two words information and communication are often used interchangeably, but they signify quite different things. Information is given out, communication is getting through. So I just wanted to share those two quotes just to help illustrate how important the field of communications is. Communication is described as the language of leadership. It is more than just about posting to, Instagram or Facebook. When done successfully and with strategy, you can reach thousands or even millions. With that reach, you can begin to shape your narrative of your campaign and become a leading resource with accurate information and tools you can share. You can share and then help to empower other people to continue to share that information and spread your message about your campaign to a larger audience. So yeah, so let's go into elements of a communications plan. So starting with your audience. So you want to make sure that you know your audience before building out a communication plan. These are the key elements to a successful communication plan. You want to know who you're really trying to reach. Don't just think you're trying to reach the New York Times. The New York Times is a very curated list of subscribers and folks who get published. So you want to be very strategic in knowing who your audience is going to be. Think about who could help move the needle on your mission. Is it a congressman in Missouri? So then maybe you might want to make your audience be constituents in Missouri. Is it a national housing organization? Then maybe your audience are members of local housing organizations that could help to spread the word to a more national organization. Or maybe it's people who haven't voted and you want to amplify the importance of voting, similar to our homes, our votes campaign. So your audience then may just be local folks in everyday settings, like you may want to reach people at the grocery store or at the hairdresser. Another aspect of a good communication plan is building your message. So you always want to try to keep it simple. Think about it like you're speaking to someone on the street who may only get their news from social media. So you may not necessarily want to convince them that your point is right. You just want to share just a simple message around the facts or what you're doing. You don't want to share too much. You want to entice the person, or you want to entice that audience with the message, and then give that audience a chance to come back to you for more. Another aspect is the channel in which you share the message. And that's, of course, going back to the audience. If you want to reach a specific targeted group of folks, again, who may not have voted, you may want to use social media. And you may want to target that social media to your specific local area. And then you may even want to drill down on that target to only reach a certain demographic of folks. Or if you want to go larger, you may want to use your website to post information on your website, and then maybe then couple that with a social media post to push people back to your website. Or anything like face-to-face communications or digital newsletters can also be a channel. But again, it goes back to, which audience are you trying to reach? And then timing. You can build a communications plan around maybe something that's happening in the news cycle, maybe something that's gone viral on social media, or maybe even a recent local event. But in order to resonate with your communications plan, you really have to take an assessment of the landscape that you want to utilize. So you want to pay attention to the news cycle and see what's happening in the local news. Or if you're trying to reach a national audience, obviously pay attention to the national audience news. or you can see if something went viral on social media, and then maybe you could um, relate it back to your campaign or your organization. Another aspect is, of course, engagement. You don't want to build a message or share a message and then not engage with your audience about that message. You do probably want to identify a communications point person to really survey the landscape and engage appropriately with your audience. And engagement can be anything from responding to a post on social media. Obviously, you want to be very intentional about how you respond on social media because you don't want to engage with trolls. But if it's a really sincere and endearing question on social media, it's always nice to engage with your followers on social media. Or you could see if it's an idea that has really resonated um, um, with like on a national call, then maybe you want to move that engagement or discussion from a national call to like maybe an in-person community event or forum. But you definitely want to acknowledge and engage with your followers and acknowledge and engage with any questions that have been posted in a public platform. Another aspect is the feedback capture. So again, once you engage, you want to consistently engage around your messaging, but you do want to have a place to capture any kind of feedback or engagement rate, because then you probably want to do like an assessment of how that communication plan resonated and then figure out what worked, what didn't work, what could be modified for the next communication plan. And in that feedback capture, you want to include multiple people at different levels within your organization. So you want to include the person who worked on social media, or you want to include the person who worked at the event and hear what they had to say about, what was discussed at the event. So those are the aspects of a good communications plan. Uh, Next slide, please. So this is a slide about visual storytelling. And this is just teeing up my colleague Carlton Taylor, who's going to come up next, and just talking about the different aspects of creating messaging and um, using the different channels to share that messaging. On this slide, I have a few different examples so you can share that messaging through videos, graphics, or marketing materials. When we say marketing materials, we mean like leave behinds like booklets, um, or branding, like logo development, anything like that. I did want to flag too that in this world of AI, artificial intelligence, I know that a lot of us try to use AI because it's a quick tool to quickly tell a story. AI is, and I think Carlton may talk to this a little bit too, but obviously we know AI is a really good tool to use. It can make you into, a quick super communicator. But we know that AI is a tool that supplements our human emotions and feelings. So we can use AI to visually tell a story, to visually create content, to visually uh, try to think of like an image to go with that content, but we know then we always have to go over that content with the actual human storytelling aspect of it, and make sure that we include, any kind of curiosity from that storytelling, critical thinking, creativity. That kind of element can only be gathered and included through the human storytelling aspect. So I think that is it for me. So I'm just going to turn it over to my colleague, Carlton.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate it. Hello all, my name is Carlton Taylor. I go by any all pronouns and proudly serve the National Low Income Housing Coalition as the Senior Graphic Communications Coordinator. And so, as Lisa said, things are being teed off to branding. And so, here in front of you is a pie chart with some terms to know and some terms that are probably going to be coming up in my portion of the presentation about branding. And so, we'll be speaking to brand and brand identity. We'll be speaking to logos, fonts and typography, color palette, websites, social media, and content. Next slide, please. So first things first, what is a brand? So a brand is the overall perception and reputation of an organization, company, or person shaped by its values, messaging, and customer experience. And so there's a reason why we're able to differentiate Coca-Cola from Pepsi and the National Low Income Housing Coalition from HUD. It's because we have these things that are tying us to these specific brands. And typically, it's an emotional and psychological association that we have with names and logos, products and services, right? And so, when we talk about brand identity, there are certain things like the visual, strategic elements that define what a brand is and what distinguishes it from another. And so, at the bottom portion of this slide, you see that we have our NLIHC logo, which shows these building blocks that lead into this home that has this sun peeking from the back. And of course, our name, we have our color palette, which is this beautiful light blue, this dark blue, this gold, and this black that you'll probably see across our website. And then we have a font family that basically ties all these things together. And NLIHC likes to have a very clean look that is able to transfer beautifully across different devices, across print and digital materials. And it allows us to be able to clearly and distinctly communicate our message. All right, next slide, please. So the next things next is speaking to what a logo is. Um, a logo is a visual symbol, mark, or design that represents a brand and organization. So, as I was mentioning earlier, there are certain things within a brand that kind of differentiate it from other types of brands, right? When it comes to Pepsi, we see the Pepsi logo and we're like, okay, this is a Pepsi product. If I love Pepsi products, I would definitely be picking it up, consuming it. Brilliant. I am from Atlanta, Georgia, and I was brought up on Coca-Cola. And so every time I see the signature Coca-Cola logo, I'm like, oh yes, I have to try it. Sprite over Sierra Mist or Starry, whatever they're calling it these days, any day for me. But that is because I have that emotional relationship with the brand of Coca-Cola. So the same thing goes with logos. And if you look at the bottom portion of this slide, I've incorporated how logos can typically adapt different looks and feels based off of what the organization, what the brand is looking for at that time. And so I used here our homes, our votes logo, which in 2024 we shifted to be this specific logo about the 2024 election. And so to make things pretty relevant to the times and to ensure that our audience, those same audiences that Lisa was speaking to, are able to adapt to what we're currently talking about, it's incredible to have logos that are extremely versatile and allow you to also be a recognizable mark. All this to say, and all this beautiful logo development, things don't have to be as convoluted. Please lean into whatever resources that you have. And later on in this presentation, there's going to be a QR code that pops up with different resources that allow you to be able to create materials regardless of your budget. And so if you're working and you're just like, we just need to get things out the door, there are free resources. And also, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more intuitive, a little bit more complex, there are also resources that you can pay for as well that will be disclosed a little bit later on down the line. Next slide, please. Okay, so speaking of logos, it's really important that you think about what people are taking away from your logo. And so, right in front of us, we have what used to be a logo for the Office of Governance Compliance for the government of the United Kingdom. And in this logo, there are a lot of things that we can take away from it. It's too simple. We don't know what it's for. There's nothing that's indicating this is from any type of government affiliate. It's just too similar to other logos that could be out in the ether. Um, but the problem that the British public had with this logo was, and if we can go to the next slide, it reads a different message when this lands on a desk and is seen from the side. And so we want to make sure that our logos are not communicating messages outside of what we're expecting to receive from our audience. And I'm seeing something come in saying, oh, this looks like it's from a designer fashion brand. Right. It doesn't really communicate the intent behind, but we have to think, what are our logos conveying? Are they actually pulling across certain things? Um, and bringing the point home that we want, or are people going to be distracted by it? So these are just some things to consider as you're creating logos. And believe it or not, this is the most suitable for work logo that I could present, because essentially that's where things tend to go. Things tend to go a bit left because people and art is extremely subjective and extremely a thing that is typically held to the eye of the beholder. So we want to make sure that we're continuing to think about these things as we're creating our brands. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so we talked about brand identity, and logos. The next thing is to talk about your 24-hour, 365 employee, which will be your website. So a website is a collection of web pages that are hosted on the internet and accessible through a URL or a domain name. Think of your website as your most valued employee. As long as you are putting information out there, be it CTAs, call to actions, or donation ask, or just updated information about reports that your organization is pushing out, allow it to be a vessel for those folks who are scrolling and trying to learn more about your mission, about your organization, when you could just be enjoying much needed time away from your desktop. And so websites are very important when it comes to brand development, when it comes to brand integrity, because it allows a person to have 100% access to you, 24/7 access to you on any device that they have. I'm assuming that folks who learned about this seminar, this session, accessed the link to register for this space by using a website. And so it's very intuitive. It's something that most of us should have access to. And it's definitely a way for us to be able to continue to nail in those messages and appease to our audiences. Next slide, please. Awesome. So we've talked about a lot. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about branding, brand integrity, logos, now websites. What goes into those spaces? What goes into creating a website? What goes into social media? What goes into all these different things that we're creating? The word is content. And so content refers to any form of information, media, or communication that's created and shared to inform, engage, and entertain an audience. And so if you have opened up social media lately, you've seen some type of form of content. It includes everything from text, images, videos, audio, graphics, infographics, blog posts, social media updates, um, newsletters, and so much more, right? Content is really the foundation, going back to what Lisa was saying before she segued things to me about visual storytelling. And I think that's something that's really important for us to do in this advocacy space, is being able to lean into content as a form of visual storytelling. Next slide, please. So when it comes to creating content, especially for us as housing advocates, as tenant leaders, it's important for us to create pieces that are eye-catching, um, visuals and compelling videos, right? But it also has to be intentional, ethical, and effective to make sure that it aligns with our audience's needs, accessibility standards, and the ever-evolving landscape of technology. And so these things in mind, and a bit later on down the line, we're going to go through some best practices, but it's really important to keep in mind, um, us as change makers. We want to ensure that the content that we're creating is truly informing. There's a lot of misinformation out on the internet. And we know in the landscape of X, formerly known as Twitter, that is owned by a certain individual. And then we have Instagram, TikTok. There's a lot of information that is being pushed out that is resonating with groups of people, but that information may not necessarily be correct. It may not necessarily be informed. It may not necessarily be educational. And so we want to make sure that we're leaning into a space of intentionality, that we're being ethical, and that we're also trying to find creative solutions to being able to connect with our audiences regardless of where they are. Next slide, please. Perfect. So there's that QR code that I mentioned earlier. If you want to take a moment to just kind of scan this QR code, this will take you to a Canva document that will give some resources that, regardless of your budget or your capacity, you'll be able to essentially start to build this brand out if you don't have it already. And so I know we have some pretty established people who are in our chat, but for folks who are really starting from the ground level, we want to be able to offer things to you uh, that give you the ability to start from a place that makes sense. And so this resource hopefully will be very helpful for people regardless of where you are in your journey. But some things to keep in mind when it comes to creating content is that there are different pieces, right? And so these resources allow you to create everything from static and motion graphics and video, right? So we're going to eventually go to a point of the presentation where we're talking about a few best practices when it comes to creating certain content that tends to resonate well with different types of audiences. But those are the three types to kind of keep in mind when you're creating content. And hopefully, this resource page will give you certain things. And I'm seeing some folks can't scan, so we'll be sure to potentially send out a link to this document. Um, Following this presentation. Next slide, please. Alrighty, so we're going to the portion of the presentation where we're going to start talking about some best practices. And so when it comes to creating content, these are some very value-added things to keep in mind. Quality, audience, and accessibility. Those are some really important things to keep in mind as you're creating content. And the next slides are going to help us kind of like unpack a few of these things. Next slide, please. All right, so quality. High quality content does not necessarily mean that it has to be an expensive production. All the things that we're leaning into here align itself with clear messaging, with visual clarity, and with accuracy over perfection. So some best practices, sometimes you just have to get the information out. If you need to sit down with your phone and create a video that is talking to people, think about when you're scrolling through TikTok or when you're looking at Instagram Reels or YouTube Shorts. You're seeing content that may not be overly produced. You're able to kind of like relate and hear what the person is saying because you're not looking at some type of commercial, right? This corporate style piece. And so leaning into those pieces, definitely allow yourself to be able to be in a space and lean into quality. But also it's really important that, things are well lit. Right now I have my living room lamp positioned in front of my laptop so that you can see me, even though DC is extremely stormy today and the lighting outside is very questionable. But I wanted to make sure you all were able to see me so that you can get like a little taste of what it means to kind of have this type of presentation that people are really able to resonate with. And the same thing goes with a decent photograph. Don't post things that are blurry or just don't optimize well or just don't look good. When you're creating things, you want to say, if I'm scrolling through social media, would I want to stop and look at this? Right? And so, not to put too much pressure onto folks, but it's really important because quality aligns with people's ability to see the things that you're producing and to be like, yep, that is exactly what I expect out of an organization that's extremely credible and has this incredible research that I uplift to people that I care about. Next slide, please. The next thing to think about is your audience. You have to understand who you're speaking to. That is the key to content success. And so I know we all know this word called viral. Viral is a fun thing, but you can't plan to be viral. You can't be like, oh, we want this post to go viral. That is not how the internet works, unfortunately. If I could, I would love for us to go back to '09 where everything went viral, but it's just not the case. There's too much going on in the ether. And so think about your audience. Think about what your audience needs. If you have these research reports that you want people to know, figure out the best platform for them to get those reports. Think about how LinkedIn is basically the business Facebook, right? And how Instagram is very much content forward. So the things that you're able to grab people's attention with, because I want to say the attention span of the average human has went down just a bit because of social media. So just think about your audience and know their preferences, know where to meet them, where they are, and also, because we're doing housing advocacy work, we want to make sure that our work is accessible to all types of people. So make sure that the things that you're creating are culturally sensitive. The last thing that we want to do is prevent our message from being properly conveyed because maybe there was some language used or something that was created that just was not being considerate of all types of people. And so, some best practices is to test different types of visual formats and to analyze engagement metrics to refine what works best for you and your audience. And those are things that Instagram works beautifully with. If you're doing any type of e-communications, like using MailChimp, like NLIHC does, you're able to kind of see how people are able to engage or if people are engaging with your content. And you're able to use those metrics to kind of refine and really make your message have the intent that you want. Next question, slide, please. Excuse me. All right, and the last thing, kind of a beautiful segue from speaking about our audience, is accessibility. So content is not always accessible, and things we want all types of people to be able to engage with our content. And so to make sure that folks are able to consider the following, and I understand that this is another level of things to consider, but truly, when it comes to housing advocacy work, we have folks who are differently able, and we want to be able to make sure that they're also able to get access to the resources that they need. And so, when opportunity allows, using alt text, which if you're creating any type of image, putting things on Instagram or putting things onto your website, oftentimes you will see an option for you to utilize alt text for different images, adding captions to all types of videos. And so YouTube will actually, and Instagram also allows you to be able to do auto captioning. And even though auto captioning may not be the most accurate at times, it allows a person who may be hard of hearing or deaf to be able to at least follow along with what is being said in your video content. Additionally, thinking about different colors. So going back to branding, you don't want colors that clash. You want colors that complement each other. But bigger, you want readability. So try your best not to put like a bright yellow background on top or put some white text on top of a bright yellow background. You want to make sure that people are able to receive the messages that you're putting out, and also just using plain language. I know some of us may be academics, and I think a really incredible thing that we tend to do at times is be able to lay things out so that anybody, regardless of their ability to access certain language, to be able to understand what we're saying in a way that extremely is palatable for all types of people. So using free resources like the AMI contrast checker and rev.com can help with improving accessibility. Next slide, please. So speaking of access, this is an example of something that you do not want to do. There are a lot of colors, there's a lot of cluster, I have seen this image enough times to kind of know what is being said, but essentially, you want to be able to grab somebody's attention as they're scrolling through social media. So think, once again, if I'm scrolling through social media, would this be something that I would want to sit with and engage with versus like just scroll past? And I have a strong feeling that a majority of people on this call would probably see this and be like, I'm not reading that. I don't know what it's trying to say. and I may or may not care to know what it's trying to say, make sure that the content that we're creating does not look like this. It has to be concise and just giving the message that essentially we all want people to take away from the things that we're creating. Next slide, please. Awesome. So you may be thinking to yourself, Carlton, why is any of this important? Well, having a polished brand, believe it or not, and just think about brands that you absolutely love. Like earlier, I brought up Coca-Cola, but you can think about Disney. You can think about I live in a Gray Star apartment property. So you can think about Gray Star, whatever that means to you. Think about these different brands and why you feel this attraction to them, right? Instant recognition, right? Emotional connection, trust and credibility, brand engagement and interaction, avenues of storytelling which lead to action. So, thinking about your website, once again, being an avenue, thinking about the content that you're creating, teeing things up to other pieces of content that you're creating so that all things speak to each other, having content in a brand that educates and that informs, which is incredibly and extremely important in the work that we do. Having audience loyalty. There's a reason why 240 of you all are on this call. Well, minus the four panelists. So 234 folks are on this call. It's because you believe and you trust the work that NLIHC is producing. And then going back to that web access component, 24/7 availability. And so I know that I have been mobilized at 2 o'clock in the morning, but who is working? I mean, people probably work at 2 o'clock in the morning, so not to diminish any of that. But for folks who aren't, and for people who are doing life saving work, to be able to have access to the work that you're doing, even when you need time away, is truly priceless. Next slide, please. Awesome. So, this is the point of the conversation where we are opening things up for questions. And so if you have any questions, please let us know, and we will defer to the Q&A portion of the chat. D, is this when you come back in?
Yes, please, if you have any questions, Q&As on the chat, we leave a couple minutes for you guys to enter any questions for our guests, Carlton and Lisa. Give it a couple of minutes. And yes, I see a few questions coming in. I'll be sharing more information about where you can find the slides and materials shortly. Then we have a question coming in. It says, which social media management software do you personally enjoy using? I love using Metrical for the analytics. And I don't know, Lisa or Carlton would like to.
Yeah, Lisa, feel free to contribute, but I know that we use Hootsuite at NLIC, and that is kind of how we tee up our different pieces of content. It is a way for us to schedule certain things, and we're also able to see what engagement looks like. And that was been very helpful with engagement around our most recent report, Out of Reach. Not sure if you want to add anything, Lisa.
Yeah, another good tool is Sprout Social. Hootsuite is does offer a free tier. And then of course you can get more reporting aspects out of a paid tier. But Sprout Social also allows you to track your influencer engagement, meaning like you can tell who has been engaging with you most and whether or not that follower has more than your followers, and then you can maybe target that influencer. So that's Sprout Social. So that's another good tool to use for social media tracking.
Then we have another question coming in. Connecting with families Have you noticed any strategies for communication that works best with connecting with them?
When you say connecting with families, if you don't mind, just elaborating more, if you're talking about like connecting, and let me just tee it up and then Carlton can maybe add on. But if you wanted to connect like on a local level or a more personal level, there's different ways that you can do that. Either if you're able to connect in person, meaning that maybe schedule like an in-person event, or schedule like a community forum kind of discussion. Obviously, in-person discussions are always a great way to connect on the local level. And then you can maybe you can invite like local council members, or local leaders to speak at that event to further engage other people. Um,
Thank you. Carlton, you like to add anything, or we can move on to the next question?
The next question is fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, well, I'm sorry. I think they said I'm talking about connecting with families at our shelter to build rapport, but also to help motivate them to engage with resources my organization and peers may provide. So I think that's really just about talking to the person, as Carlton mentioned, reaching people where they are. So just again, talking to the families, hearing really what their concerns are, what their experiences have been, in that kind of environment, we want to figure out that, people love genuine conversations. And then once you assess what they're really looking for, and what they have access to, then you can figure out how you can be a best resource to them. If it's, again, to connect them with a reporter so they can tell their story more widely, or if it's to work with them on creating a blog and then post that blog to your website, but it's whatever they feel comfortable sharing and doing, is a way that you could connect with the families in your shelter.
The next question is, how often should the website be updated to keep up with the social media platforms?
All the time. Please keep all your materials updated. And like thinking about our website is massive, right? And so it's important that when you're working with so many different pieces of material, to always try to keep to keep note of where everything is living. And so if you're making updates on social media and you're pointing people to your website, which I hope you are, if you're always when you're saying things like we're doing this, you always want to bring people back to your website because the website will be guaranteed and should be guaranteed as the most up-to-date information. So always point people back to your website and always make sure that your website is up to date.
The next question we have is, how do we reach out to the potential workshop attendees who do not like who do not like to receive any information from social media?
I can add a thought. And that thought is still going back to community engagement, engaging on the local level, in person, national calls. Um, Again, you want to figure out like who your audience is and how best to meet them where they are. So if they don't like social media, then maybe you want to again go back to a community event. Um, if they don't like social media, you may want to engage with them over email, like build a listserv so you can have that community discussion.
And I would just add old fashioned knocking on the door, meeting people where they are. Back in my organizing days, building relationships is so key and connecting to their self interest. The next question we have, can you recommend a software or application to automate online activities?
Well, it depends, right? It depends on what you're trying to automate because I think, Carlton had mentioned before that the coalition uses MailChimp to send out our newsletters and some of our e-blasts. So that can be a scheduled thing. If you wanted to reach out to reporters, we use a management tool called Muckrack. And again, that's something that you can schedule, and that could be an automated thing. So it just depends on the audience and what you're trying to push out. But most tools you can schedule something um, or make it automated.
A next question states, we have a program as well as an organizational message we would like to convey. Which should we start with first?
Um, I'll kind of clue in here, and then Lisa, if you feel the need, feel free. I think going back to what Lisa and even to what you were saying, Dee, from a very field perspective, right? I think it's important to know what your audience wants, right? And so if you have a program that you're really wanting to get up and running, I think you can fully lead with that, even if you don't have much around what your organizational message is. But I would hope that your program is also tying in your organizational message. And so there's ways for you to be able to do both at the same time, where you don't necessarily have to start with one over the other. It's just a matter of being a little bit creative. And I think if you have like I'm thinking about which NLIHC has been around for over 50 years, and so I just won't be able to know about the first thing that we did. But if I think about our homes, our votes, right? There is an activation element to it that we want to be able to tee up and be like, yep, this is what we're doing. We have this webinar, and hopefully in that webinar, you're talking about all the different things. Like I can talk about this space that we have with the Training Institute. Dee does a great job at talking about the purpose of the Institute and why we're having this space together. So it's possible for those two things to exist at the same time. It just takes a level of brainstorming and of thinking through and just having people or just a space to kind of figure out what that looks like. Um, Lisa, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Carlton. I completely agree. I think that there's should be a space for you to do both at the same time. You don't want to, if you're introducing both, you probably don't want to create separate messaging, separate spacing for it. You want to make sure that everybody knows that they're linked. So, for instance, Carlton's example of Our Homes, Our Votes. Obviously, it's a campaign under the National Low Income Housing Coalition, but of course, it can be a partner entity, right? We're talking about getting people out to vote who may not have voted before, but we also want to educate them to let them know that there may be ballots that you need to vote for that could potentially increase affordable housing in your community. So those are two separate goals, but they still work together and they need to work together.
Next question we have is from Tamara Monroe. As a smaller nonprofit, how can you handle all of the movements?
So I can make a suggestion that you really shouldn't try to overwhelm yourself. When I first started, as I mentioned, I'm coming back to the coalition after leaving here in 2020. And when I first started, the coalition had maybe 20 employees, and now we're more than doubled. But we're still, even at that 20 employees, we were still motivated to do all of the same great work, just with fewer people. So what we try to do is obviously we try to delegate. We tried to take on what we could. We tried to hone in on the issues that we really thought that we could really move the needle on. We tried to utilize partnerships. We didn't gatekeep. We spread the wealth. Maybe we were the resource in the lowest income communities and identifying research there. But then maybe a partner was more of a resource in the homelessness community and identifying research there. So then we then partnered so that both of us could share the wealth And then in the end, hopefully everybody is spreading the same message.
And then last question is, if you are creating a new e-newsletter, should you break the articles into blocks, adding color to discourage lack of eye interest?
Sorry, I was trying to send the QR code link to folks. So if you're having issues with scanning the QR code, I just sent a link to the Canva link. I feel the more color is better. You know what? I'm not mad at that. Color is gorgeous. But I think what's very important is that we are continuing to lean into things that remind people of your brand. And so NLIHC, you see that blue and you're like, oh yes, that is the coalition. Um, Blue is also a color that is related to progress and to beautiful blue skies. And so it's all these different things that you want to consider as you're creating things. Um, but the question was not what was mentioned. It said, hold on, you let me go back to it. If you are creating an e-newsletter, should you break the articles into blocks, adding colors to discourage eye interest? I would say just keep it simple, right? Lean into what you're already producing or what your logo is suggesting you use. Hopefully, you're working with somebody who really enjoys creating art. If not, just keep it simple and just make sure the information that you're delivering is digestible. I don't think you have to focus much on color as much as how things will look on different devices. Because, excuse me, different mail clients, when I say mail clients, I'm thinking Outlook, Gmail, Yahoo, Hotmail, AOL. They all come up and they go through your email a bit differently. And the last thing that you want is for your email to come off and people aren't able to read what's on it because you're doing a lot with colors. And so just keep it simple and to the point and keep it concise too. You don't want your e-blast to be too long. You want people to be able to say, okay, I see this, I understand it, let me take action, let me donate, let me give, let me share this information with other people so other folks can take to it and be informed. I hope that answers that question.
And before we close, let's give a huge round of applause to our incredible speakers, Lisa and Carlton, for sharing their time, expertise, and wisdom with us today. Thank you both for pouring into our tenant leaders and residential leaders and advocates, helping us strengthen our voices through communication and branding. Now, here are a few important next steps. For those who've been asking, yes, the recording and PowerPoint from today's session in the and will be made available soon. And not just today's session. All previous webinars from our Training Institute series will also be posted on our Training Institute webpage, which is the same place where you registered. Be sure to check back regularly for more resources, policy updates, and technical assistance. I highly encourage you to register as a member of National Low Income Housing Coalition. Membership gives you access to powerful tools, community connections, and support to take your advocacy to the next level. And we're just getting started. We invite you to stay tuned for our next three-part series in the pilot training course for tenants and residents. We will be reconvening and relaunching this September, and so look out for that registration. We can't wait to continue this journey with you all, and I'll leave you with this reminder: you don't need permission to lead, just the courage to begin. Together, we're building something bigger than ourselves. So until next time, keep organizing, keep building, and keep believing. Have a good one.